Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel I like to walk a very fine line between a shopping addictive makeup monster and a responsible adult with a makeup hobby. Now, I really enjoy eyeshadow singles, duochromes, multichromes, blush, highlight, lip gloss, basically everything except pressed glitter, and today we're going to be doing a ranking of all the palettes I tried in February. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with me, we're getting into it right now. And I'm trying a slightly different camera setup, so hopefully I can keep myself in frame, God only knows. But I'm going to start by mentioning the Arthurine blush palette. Now this palette is a face palette, so it's not ranked. It is not the lowest ranking thing I tried this month, but this is the blush palette, and I have to say these blushes are ridiculously pigmented. Like, this was not something I was prepared for, and so I had somewhat of a hard time using them as delicately as I needed to in order to prevent myself from going like full-on clown. In terms of the color selection, I really like these two shades. I really liked this shade, and I got a little bit of use out of these two, but I would say these two are the shades that I went into the most. So if you were looking for, blushes, those would be the ones I'd recommend. But if you are a fair skin tone, like, brace yourself, because you're gonna have a hard time getting this to blend out nicely. And I did go ahead and decide not to try this palette at all, which I had mentioned in my video sort of introducing this month's palettes. So I am gonna go ahead and just put this in the pile to declutter when I'm ready to kind of make that happen. So coming in at number 19 was the Game Beauty Cyberpunk palette. I originally picked up this palette because it is one of the color stories that I found the most like bright and poppy compared to a lot of what Game Beauty was putting out previously, which was more neutral or had pressed glitters in it. So I got really excited for this palette, went ahead and picked it up, and when I started using it, it's very underwhelming. The mattes are very okay. The shimmers are very, very soft. Like, this is, if you are afraid of color, this is the palette for you. If you are not afraid of color, if you want like bright, popping, interesting colors, this is not your palette. All right, coming in at number 18 is the BH Zodiac palette, and what I think I've learned this month from doing this sort of project, I'll call it, is that palettes that had like a cult following, a cult status, that are like 5, 6, 7 years old in terms of when they had that cult status, probably are not going to impress me as much as I think they will, because I was so hyped for these palettes when they first came out. Like, when I first discovered them, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the palette for me. Like, look how pretty it is. And I do love sort of the aesthetics of the baked shades. You've got the matte shades, you've got a baked highlight in the center. Like, I think that's a really cool thing. I like the sort of zodiac concept that they were going with. But when I actually try the shades, I'm like, these are fine. They're just fine. And I wish for the palettes that I get in my collection that they're more than just fine. So for this one, it ranked down a lot lower for that reason. In general, I still think it's like decent quality. It just wasn't what I was expecting. And I think my 2024 view on palettes, like, you really have to raise your stakes up a little bit before I'm impressed enough to say it's like good quality. Next up is Glamlight Chocolate Martini, and this was the neutral palette, or one of them, that I picked out for the month of February, and it's a cute little palette. I was really super excited about this shade. So I think when I finally got this, I paid like $9, so I'm not, hugely disappointed. I like this all night shade. I like the dark chocolate shade, but everything else in here, of course, is very like warm tone neutral, and the iridescent shade in here, oh guys, I'm so sorry, I keep going in and out of focus. The iridescent shade in here is one of those like white to yellowy gold kind of shades, which is probably one of my least favorite iridescent combinations. So for me, this shade is what saved it going as high as it did, but it couldn't go any higher because that's one shade in the whole palette. Next up is ColourPop Lost in Love, and this one I impulse bought this one, you guys. And Valentine's Day palettes are definitely something that I get suckered into very easily. I just think they're so cute, and so this one was no exception. I saw somebody do a look that combined the oranges and the pinks, and I thought, wow, that's beautiful. So I picked up the palette, and it's fine. I think online I saw the colors being more diverse than what they are like in person. these two are quite similar, these two are almost identical, and so I just kind of lose what I thought was going to be a more bright poppy gradient across the palette, and it's more muted, it's more toned down than what I thought it was going to be, so I was a little bit disappointed. The metallics in here are just fine as well. You got like a duochrome kind of peachy pink shade in here, two kind of standard metallics, and then these are two of the newer pressed glitters that are allegedly eye safe, I don't know. So yeah, I probably could have not bought this, given myself like a week or two, and I would have forgotten it came out entirely. And the reason I say that is because I put this towards the back of my palettes for the month that I had already kind of tried enough to review, and I forgot it was in there by the time I went to actually do this video. So number 15, I think, this is the Glamlite Cupcake palette, and it's a cute little 12 pan palette. Like, I'm not mad at it, it's just not that special, and this is coming from a Glamlite formula, which I really like. Like, the metallics in here are pretty, the mattes in here are pretty, it's very same, and it didn't really differentiate itself as like special or interesting or anything, so it kind of fell a little lower. What does save it though is this cute little packaging. Like, I love the little cupcake sprinkles inside the packaging. I think that is very cute. All right, next up is the Enduring Love palette from Sydney Grace in the light color story or colorway, and it looks like this. Now, this is another palette where, because I had wanted this for so long and hadn't purchased it, I think in my mind, I thought this was going to be this like phenomenal color story, and it's fine, it's decent. The metallics in here, like especially this one, is like aluminum foil on your eyes. Like, it's really pretty. It's got a lot of reflectivity to it, and I do like these deeper jewel toned metallics over here, but a lot of the mattes in here, of course, are very neutral, very similar, and the black in here is very like gray. It's not like a full-on matte black. So I just kind of found myself wishing that there was more to this palette than what there actually was. And again, I think that's a problem of this palette came out a long time ago, so it was a cult favorite a long time ago, and in today's perspective, this just isn't as special. Coming in at 13 is the Juvia's Place Candy Shop palette, and it looks like this. Now, the packaging, of course, like suckered me right in, and I think the sort of pink and blue color story is an interesting kind of mix, but a lot of these like warm tone neutrals I really did not need at all, and this one as well. The pinks in here are pretty, the blues in here are pretty, they don't mix well together in my personal opinion, and I was really kind of interested in some of the metallics in here because they just looked a little bit like funky and different compared to metallics that I see in other brands and other palettes, and they were fine, they just weren't like phenomenal. So this one came down a lot lower. This is the Lily palette from Clarity Cosmetics, and this particular palette is one of their older palettes, and so it has the bigger pans in it. I think it suffers because you have two mattes in here that are virtually identical, and you have two metallics in here that are quite similar. So head on, one is like more fuchsia purple, one is just more fuchsia pink, but they look very similar in person, and I just kind of find myself disappointed. Then you also have the sort of like red and orange, again, just very similar. So I kind of wish they would have made this a little bit more differentiated in terms of the colors, because this is not a huge color story, it's 10 shades, so they should have been able to make this a little bit more diverse than what they did. Next up is the BH Nude Ego palette, and this is the Unleashed Wild color story, and it's really not that wild. It's army greens and mints, and I think this one falls into that same trap of just being too similar, because these two shades are virtually identical. And then with the metallics, I feel like they all have a little bit of a gray silver kind of undertone to them, so they kind of look a little weird with the mattes that are in here. So I like the shades individually, I don't like the shades all together. So this is definitely only a companion palette for other things. So this should be number 10. This is the Beauty Bay Metamorphic palette, and it's probably one of the most disappointing Beauty Bay palettes I've ever tried, which is shocking because I was so excited to try it. So the mattes in here, obviously you've got these two kind of navy blue shades that are both quite similar. You've got the purple, and then you've got two matte grays. It's just not variated enough for me to say like, oh, this is a standalone palette. And I love the shimmers in here, like the metallic duochrome kind of shimmers in here are really beautiful. I think this is one of the most unique shades that I've ever played with. It's kind of this like oil slick to black to blue to teal, duochrome, peacocky kind of shade. I don't know. Very cool. But the shades just don't work together with the matte, so I find myself having to come into this and come into something else in order to make this palette work. Coming in at number 9 is the Unearthly Charmer palette, and I already posted my review of the entire collection for Charmer. This particular palette I think is pretty, but it's somewhat disjointed. Like this 6-pan definitely makes sense and that 6-pan definitely makes sense, but together I just don't think they make as much sense as I hoped they would. I tried to combine them in my look and the look just went very autumnal very quickly, so it was just kind of a weird setup. I think the shades themselves are nice, but when I see the front cover, I don't know why this doesn't fit with this, and I don't know why that is, but it just doesn't in my mind, so it falls a little bit lower for that reason. All right, next is the first of one of the little Makeup a Murder 6-pans, and this is the My Murder Weapon palette, which looks like this. It's a very cute little 6-pan of different toppers and duochromes. I personally was not thinking I was going to like this palette at all, but I actually do quite like it. This metallic kind of grapey gray brown is very, very pretty on the eyes. And then I do like that this pink has sort of a red strawberry pink undertone, and then it pops to a little bit brighter of a pink. I think that's pretty cool. The problem that I have with these 3 palettes in general is that all 3 have basically the same blue shade in them, so that I feel like is kind of a miss. That's an iridescent blue, obviously, because it's not bright blue. But the rest of the shades in here I think are quite pretty. I just happen to like the other 2 palettes better, so you'll see them coming up further along in the ranking. So coming in at number 7 was the Sailor Moon ColourPop. This is the For Love and Justice palette. I thought about picking up both of the palettes that were Sailor Moon themed, but this one definitely called to me more because it's a little bit more cool toned. Definitely very pastel. It's easy to lose these mattes in your look, but the metallics in here I think make up for it. I really enjoyed using these 2 metallics, this metallic, this one, and then even this one I like kind of popped in my inner corners, or I would pop it above my crease, and I thought it just added like a nice way to capture some light in those areas. Overall, I wish the mattes were a little bit more intense than what they are, and definitely didn't need the sparkle in this particular matte blue shade. But in general, I do still think it's a very pretty palette. And coming in at number 6 is the Glaminatrix Rich Romantic palette, which I'm going to try to hold very carefully because one of the shades popped out once before. But this palette is very, very pretty. I like the sort of olivey tones combined with the pinky purple shades in here. I definitely didn't need this sort of coral shade in here. And I think this sort of red to orange to green multichrome is very overdone when it comes to multichrome, so I could have done without that one, but that's like a personal problem. Since I have a large collection, that would be more of an issue for me than it would be for somebody with a more reasonably normal sized collection. But the shades they did pick for this one, wow, very, very pretty. All right, coming in at number 5, this is the second Makeup a Murder shimmer palette, and this is the If Looks Could Kill. And it looks like this. Now the orange obviously is my least favorite out of everything in this palette, but I do think the other colors make up for it. I like the intensity of the blue and the green that are in this particular palette. The purple, you know, in my mind I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be this like rich grapey purple, and it definitely pulls more fuchsia on the lids, so for me it goes a little bit warmer than what I would personally care for, but in general I do still think it's a very pretty palette. Coming in at number 4 is the Season of the Witch palette. This is the winter palette from Notoriously Morbid, and this is the first palette that I've tried from them. They are a hand-pressed, handmade formula, so it's definitely takes a little bit of getting used to. The mattes kick up a lot, and you can definitely get a lot of fallout, so do your base last, I would say, with this type of formula. The metallics in here are what save this palette by far. This, like, how do I want to describe it? It's like an aqua blue, and then it fades to like purple, and there's some fuchsia shimmers in it. It has a very like iridescent multichrome kind of sparkle to it, which I really like. This one is a little bit more flaky, but it's got purple, it's got gold, it's got green. It's also a very, very beautiful shade. This one was a little bit less impressive. It seems to just be more of like a soft robin's egg blue metallic, so that one was less exciting for me. I really enjoyed this green metallic because it is like a deep, deep, intense emerald green metallic. So in terms of this particular palette, I do think it's quite pretty. The formula definitely takes a little bit more effort in terms of paying attention to not having a lot of fallout, making sure the particles are sort of spaced out on the lids, but I still think the looks that you can get with this are very pretty. Coming in at number 3 is the last of the Makeup A Murder palettes. And this one is the Death Metal palette. This is the one that I was the most intrigued by, and it is a pure iridescent multi-chrome bundle. Again, you have sort of a blue, a green. You have 2 shades here that are kind of both golden, and 2 shades that are kind of like fuchsia-y pink, and then more of like an orangey pink. So they're not super differentiated from each other. I think they could have made them a little bit more differentiated, especially these 4 right here. But in general, I think this is great, and it's perfect, you know, if you're going to be going somewhere and you just need like a small something to come with you. This is perfect. Coming in at number 2 is Beauty Bay Reckless Romance, and this was quite an impressive palette. I really like this one. I have a hard time not going back to it. The rosy kind of mauve-y shades I think are really pretty, and I like that they went really deep and dark with this particular palette so that you could get like very smoky eye looks. Obviously, the 3 sort of warm tone neutrals in here, I didn't really need. Everything else in here, though, I absolutely love. This is one of my favorite Beauty Bay palettes now. And coming in at number 1 is the Cosmic Brushes Gothic palette. This palette is small but mighty. It has really beautiful purpley shades in here, and then it does have some of those similar kind of like mauve-y purple shades as the Reckless Romance palette. But I think this one, the formulas, I just like just a smidge better. The metallics in here are quite beautiful. I love this purple iridescent that's in here. You've got a beautiful sparkly black matte in here. In general, the only shade that I really didn't use a whole lot was this one, just because I felt like it was too warm and too pastel, but everything else I thought blended together so nicely. Alright, and with that said, that is everything for this video. I want to thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!